Last night I got several requests on making another video on how I actually attached everything to my unit. So I'm going to do my best and try to explain everything to you. So here we go. So my first task is to figure out where exactly I wanted to mount the controller. And I figured the best place, because it's the largest part of the whole assembly, the best place would be between the frame rails on the right side of the motor. And as you can see from this position, it fits snugly between the two rails. The lights are extremely small. They're less than 2 inches long and less than 1/2 inch thick. On the top, as you can see, I have hot glue in the little seam for extra safety. And on the bottom, you can see that there's little screws that screw into the carbon fiber tube. Now I have hot glue around each of those screws as well to stop them from spinning out or possibly loosening up. The wiring and everything is attached by a small piece of electrical tape that's wrapped around a couple times in different little sections, as you can see here. Now, what's really neat is someone might say, well, how are you going to get that apart if you have to travel with it? Well, each of these joints still come apart, okay? And each wire has a plug which is down here, so that this plug comes off and this little bit of tail hangs from this tube, so it can all be disassembled or reassembled at any time without any difficulty. Now how I did the spacing was I just moved them over. See the open squares right here? I just moved them over so that they're in an open square area, so that when you disassemble, it's not interfering with any of the mesh or anything of that nature, and they're fully adjustable within that little square of netting. And looking from the back side or the propeller side of the unit, you see a little tape there, little tape here, little tape here on the tube, and then tape here on the tube, and then you can see that there's another little connector right here connecting it to the power source and the controller. And naturally the same thing from this side. This side does the same thing. The wire comes down, it's attached, and right back in here is another little connector for this side. And that's all behind the seat. And it's held in, you know, behind these straps here so it can't interfere with the motor. Now the controller unit that's on here, what I did was I wedged the controller up between the frame, because the frame is like a V shape, and then what I did was I hot glued it in place. Only because if I would have done it with zip ties would have made it look nasty and everything else. And this stuff is all removable. If you want to take it off, it'll come off. But it's going to hold this unit very secure, and it's not going to go anywhere. The ties, the rest of the plug-ins from the bottom strobe, you know, all the wires from the bottom strobe comes up and connects into a connector. And then these connectors just sit right here and they're wire tied. And so are all the rest of the wires as it goes up. So it's actually a nice clean, pretty clean install. Now the strobes themselves, they have their own little power source switch, which is right here. And then you have your selectors of the modes that you want for your different flashing. So you got 3, you got A, B, and C modes for different types of flashing. Now for the string lights or the LED lights, I just use this little plug which comes straight from the battery source. Okay. And I use that as my, I use this little plug as my main connector for my LEDs, and you can see my LEDs just came on. So when this gets plugged in, you see the LEDs come on. And that's just so I didn't have to add another switch or any other wiring or anything that's cumbersome in that area. Top LED just sits with its little tiny tab, sits between the light and the Velcro. So the tab hangs underneath here and holding it in place. It can't go anywhere. So it just sits there with the tension of the wire where it's taped and everything, so I didn't have to, you know, mount it permanently or screw it or anything of that nature. It just kind of comes out. So the only thing that's really holding it is this and the Velcro squeezing it against the top frame. So it can't really go anywhere. It's sandwiched between the two units. The bottom strobe is held on with two zip ties going around the small support tube for the fuel tank. And so are the wire. The wire is also held on by the zip ties, and it just travels down and slides down along the bottom foot of the frame and then up to the control box. But even though this light is mounted with the zip ties, it doesn't go anywhere. You know, it's got the L bracket on it and it doesn't move anywhere. It's very, very secure. Regarding the LEDs on the frame, the LEDs come with a sticky back dual adhesive tape on the back side. But you don't want to rely on just that sticky tape because it may come off, and if it does, it's a little bit late once it gets caught in the prop. So what I do is I wrap packing tape around the tube, you know, clear packing tape around the tube with or over top of the LEDs to secure that in place between each one of the mesh squares as it goes up. Now you can kind of see it better here in the light, how the clear packing tape is holding that on. And then that keeps the frame smooth too for your strings for your glider. So there's no rough edges for the glider. And then as far as where the frame separates to take it apart for packing, I leave the LEDs loose right here in this area so that you can spread the tube apart for packing and putting it back in your carrying case. So this way, when the unit needs to be pulled apart or whatever, it still comes apart exactly the same way. You can still pack it the same way and transport it the same way without interrupting any flow of the disassembly or reassembly of the unit. And it also makes a nice clean package the way it's done. You can't see any wires, there's no wires hanging, there's no real zip ties exposed anywhere, so it doesn't look nasty or cobbled. Now, on another note, besides the lights, I've seen a lot of guys complain or have issues with their exhaust bolts coming loose off their paramotors. Now what I did was I wire tied them. Now there's no holes drilled in there for the wire tie. I still wire tied them anyway, but I used the threads on the bolts for the wire tie. And here, let me show you a close-up so that you can understand what I'm trying to say. Now, as you look at the bolts don't have any drilled holes in the heads like we do on normal aircraft for safety. And even though the nuts are like a locking nut, they still don't hold securely. So what we do is we wire tie around the thread of the bolt and pull that tight and tie one to the other. And every time that bolt tries to turn, whether it's the bolt or the nut tries to turn off from vibration, it jams itself against the little thread on, oops, let me get it in focus. The thread actually jams against the wire tie. So that way your bolt never comes loose and it never leaks in the seam. It's only going to leak when this whole unit here fails. And eventually they all do. So let's look up here by the top of the motor. It's still wound around the threads up on top, and it goes from one bolt to the next bolt all the way around to the back side and securing all of those bolts so they never loosen up. And it never leaks through here. So once you get it snug to the proper torque, your exhaust never leaks because your screws never loosen up. So just a little FYI. So hopefully everything that I've shared with you today answers a lot of your questions and helps you along the way. So again, until next time, blue skies, fly safe. Oh, and one last thing. All the information for the strobe and the LEDs will be listed below. Thanks again for watching.